Okay, welcome back. We're still on page 11 talking about the dynamic limitations. The programmer could set this thing up so it only triggers when one particular person is logged in. So it won't appear malicious at all unless Bob is logged in, or the company president, or the time of day, or at 2 o'clock in the morning, or Friday the 13th. I mean, there's an awful lot of things they can do to make static analysis practically useless, because you look at it and go, I don't see anything going on. So reversing this, uncovering the special conditions. For example, you have to be logged into Facebook, otherwise the virus will just wait. That kind of stuff. Yeah, you're going to have to do an awful lot of reverse engineering to determine that's how it works. Okay, because static analysis is not going to be able to tell you, I'm waiting for Bob, or I'm waiting for Facebook. But having a trigger for April Fool's Day is a very common thing, right? Unfortunately. And again, you might be able to spot that because you might be able to find that date, but that's all. Okay, the process on page 13. So what they're basically saying is, here's the steps you would go through. So VX is their little abbreviation for malware virus. So first you go through static analysis. And the static analysis is just poking it with a stick. You're not running it. Trying to see if there's anything funky in there, any code snippets that are doing things that you don't expect it to do. And you gather some information. You gather artifacts and information and code. But you're probably not done there. Most likely that's not going to cut it. And then you switch over to doing dynamic analysis, where you go to a special lab scenario where you've neutered almost all the protection mechanisms of your machine because you want the virus to run, and you set up all sorts of monitoring equipment to monitor what it's doing. Now that, you gather an awful lot of information, and you can get a lot more artifacts and information. Maybe you're not done though, because maybe you can't quite figure out what they're doing. I mean, you see what it's doing, but you can't figure out why or what it's supposed to be doing. And that's where reverse engineering comes in. That's where we go in and disassemble the code and actually look at the code to see how it works. That's the one that requires skill set to understand, not skills to perform the step, but skills to understand. And after you've got all that, then you can either say, well, the malware has been identified and well understood, and I can, do something about it, the remediation steps or reporting and all this stuff. Or the solution was derived from, gathered information, and now that I know what it is, I know what it is I need to do. So this is essentially how this thing works. Manual analysis, you get to decide how long this thing runs, rather than, some sort of a tool that says, we're going to run this for 10 minutes, right? So a virus that goes to sleep for 15 minutes would evade that kind of detection, right? If you just told it, run this thing for 10 minutes, and yet the virus writers know that these tools do this. They know that they run for 10 minutes. So they'll just say, well, fine, my malicious intent won't fire up until 15 minutes. Anyway, automated analysis. So malware writers have these exact same tools that you're going to use, right? Just, right? So here's a thing talking. This is old, but don't worry about it. The relevance of the hockey stick is what we're after. On page 16, figure 1.2. They're talking about 1.4 million samples today. We're not necessarily talking about malware. We're talking about malware samples. The number of times researchers had to grab something and do analysis on it. And it is huge amount of stuff. So can you kind of look at this and tell that manually analyzing samples is a viable option? No. We're going to be talking about a tool later that does this whole thing automated. You just drop a sample into the drop slot, so to speak, and the machine takes over from there and does all the analysis for you. We're not going to do that because that's kind of expensive stuff. So processing multiple sandboxes at a time, that makes sense, because I could have an awful lot of these guys. I have a server farm full of all these automated sandboxes, and so I could just drop gazillions of these things in and just have them all run. Kind of makes sense. Okay, so what happens when you get a sample? There's a couple of things you can do. First of all, is it something that you've already seen before? If you've already seen this before, you either know it is good or bad. Well, then you just don't need to process it anymore. Oh, I already got that one. Thank you. Does it match some legitimate file? In other words, is it something that you expect? I mean, is it notepad.exe or calc.exe? And does it match any existing malicious files? And then does it have any special needs, the file itself? So they talk about a drop sample. So a white list of signatures that they know are benign. In other words, you put this thing in here and it goes, look, we're well familiar with what Notepad looks like, and we're going to whitelist this because we know darn well it's not anything bad. A duplicate sample. Yeah, okay, that was virus, but I've already did that. I did that one last week, so no need for me to do it again. And it could be that this type of analysis won't be able to tell you the specific thing, but it'll be able to tell you the family of viruses. Family just basically means, its behavior. This is a information stealer, or it's a ransomware, that type of family. So it's a group of stuff that behaves the same way, perhaps known by a variant name, like there's one called Conflicker, and there was a Conflicker A and a B and a C, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the malware class, it's kind of grouped with what they do. For example, I'm an information stealer. I'm malware. I'm ransomware, that kind of stuff. So you guys know what ransomware is. That's the one that usually will encrypt your files and then hold you hostage and get you money before you get them unencrypted. The thing here about encryption is kind of weird. Do you think that the malware writers encrypt the entire C drive? Every single file? Well, no, because they want the machine to run. We can't encrypt everything. We only really, a malware writer only wants to encrypt your user files, particularly everything in your My Documents, your folders, pictures, and that kind of stuff. So that's how they do it. They don't encrypt everything. And the next thing we need to do is determine whether or not a file is called packed. Packed is a term where, in the old days, when you had dial-up modems, and if I had to download a program, I wanted it to be as small a program as possible, right? I just wanted to get the stuff down. So you would compress it in this thing. And then before we had like uncompressed things like WinZip and all the rest of that stuff, you could actually get this thing called a packer. It would take an ordinary application, compress it smaller, and then when you run it the first time, it goes, hang on a second, let me expand it all and then run. It induces a small delay when you first fire up your application, but other than that, it's harmless. Now, the cool thing about this, virus writers look at them and went, ooh, that means you won't be able to do any static analysis on my application because you can't see inside the code because it's compressed. Ooh, sneaky trick. So a legitimate tool that was been available since the dial-up days, now being used by virus writers to obfuscate or prevent you from doing stuff. Later on, we're going to be talking about how we are going to use that exact same technique to our advantage. For example, if I wanted to send you a sample right now, I send it to you like on an email or something. Your antivirus and your email client are going to say, whoa, we ain't taking this. We know this is bad. So how do I get it past that to be able to legitimately send you a sample? I put it in a zip file. But wait, you think Microsoft Exchange is too stupid to look into a zip file? No, it will. It'll look inside the zip file if it's an attachment and go, whoa, I ain't going to like this. But what if I was to password protect the zip file? Then when it goes up to the Exchange server is going to look at it and go, let me go look inside this. Oh, I can't see inside it. I guess it's okay. Isn't that kind of cool? So we're actually going to use the same technique that the virus writers use when we pass stuff back and forth. Okay, on page 20, to be an effective malware analyst, you got to be familiar with malware in general, that's okay. But the tools, it's all about tools. I mean, geez, we're going to learn a gazillion tools. Some of them are amazing, and I really love them. And of course, you're going to get a kick out of some of this, I think. And then it takes an awful lot of patience. You really just can't have a formula where you go in and say, well, here's what we're going to do, and everything's fine, and oops, time to move on to the next one. No, you're going to stumble, and you're going to fall, you're going to scratch your head. It's going to take a lot of time and energy. So familiarization, you know how the virus behaves, how it stays persistent, how does it survive a reboot, how it protects itself, how it manipulates the target environment. Those are all the things we're going to do. And then familiarization with the tools. Look, we're going to be doing an awful lot of tools. Some of these tools are like Wireshark. Wireshark is a very good tool, but it's kind of heavy-handed. I mean, you really need some experience with it. I mean, I can't just say, oh, well, you know, use Wireshark and do this. I'm going to have to show you exactly, you know, how to select the IP addresses and how to look at the content. I mean, it's kind of entailed. So knowing the tools and getting familiar with the tools is the third one. And then the fourth one is just, you know, page 22. Just don't get frustrated. You know, if things don't go well, just there's no real set process. Don't go crazy on it. Okay, some extra things that are not in the book, but it seem appropriate for Chapter 1 is there's basically 4 layers of defense in a modern Windows application. One is called Smart Screen. If you ever downloaded a file off the internet, it's going to come up and say, whoa, it's reputation based. It's going to look at this file you're downloading and go, I don't see that many people downloading this, so you might want to beware. Smart Screen. And then there's one called Unusual App, where the virus has never seen this before, so it's not saying no. It's saying, are you sure? And then this thing called alternate stream, we're going to do a demo of that. Alternate stream is a technique where your machine knows the original source of the file. If you copied it from a flash drive or copied it off the internet, it can tell the difference between where it was copied. That's pretty cool. And then digital signatures. If I'm downloading a file off the internet, an exe file or an SMI file, or MSI file for doing installs, I really want this thing to be digitally signed so I know it's really coming from the company that I think it is. It's coming from Microsoft or it's coming from a developer. And it tells me 2 things. One is, did it really come from the person you say it came from? And has anyone messed with it since that time? So digital signatures are a great way of doing this. Okay, we've come to the end of the chapter. We're not quite done because we're going to do some hands-on stuff in just a second.